Get the frick up, y'all. It's Tuesday. And we're getting back at it with an OG edition of Dork Discourse for you tonight, folks. As you can see, those who have been around for a long hot minute, back from the good old days, Tom's back in his classic attire when he means business. That's how you know it's about to get serious. This was unbeknownst to me, by the way. This was not planned, but clearly he's coming for blood. Clearly, it's gonna be a cutthroat edition of the discourse tonight. A good old classic Dork Discourse debate for you all. But hello to everybody who was holding it down in the early gang. We had Sean, Charlie was there, Emery's, I think it's all Bird Church earlier, Stanley's, Daniel Berry Sports Highlights, what's up, what's up? Rafe is here, what's up? Sal, Jay, let's get it, team. Thank you all for tuning in. Welcome, welcome. For what should be an interesting, and Jason Olsen I saw earlier, should be an interesting edition tonight of, once again, an old-fashioned Dork Discourse, because we're going to be doing some comparisons. We figured it's been a hot minute since we've done some tier list rankings here, and now that we have Skeleton Crew is wrapped and complete, and as of now, the current docket of live-action Star Wars television shows, I think, has come to an end in terms of new content. Because from here on out, we have Ahsoka Season 2. We have multiple other seasons of already existing shows in the pipeline. Ahsoka Season 2, Andor Season 2 upon us very soon, months away. I need an Andor Season 2 trailer right now. Frick yes. Agreed. I'm sure one is imminent. They can't hold out for much longer. It's literally months away at this point. It's already February. Why is he looking like a man in black? Because he means business. When Tom's ready to debate, this is how he shows up. He shows up in style, like a businessman. So this has actually spawned because we recently rewatched, as we shared with y'all. We did a Andor Season 1 re-binge, which was a good experience, but we got to talking afterwards, and we were comparing it to other Disney Plus shows, and some of the comments you were making were surprising me, so I was like, you know what, it's been a while since we've locked in and done an updated current tier list, our own rankings of, as I was saying, the live-action Disney Plus Star Wars shows, which I think are not being wrapped up per se, but as I was saying, everything going forward, I don't think there's anything new that's been announced. Not saying that I wouldn't welcome that, but as of now, it's Season 2 of Andor, Season 2 of Ahsoka, if Mandalorian gets another season, or if it's all just culminating in a final film. So, that said, we're going to be doing Andor Hype is coming. It is, Sal, it is. We're going to be doing our own individual, one at a time. We will each fill out our tier list that we have already in the wings, waiting to go. Don't be alarmed because this format is dramatic. We're doing this obviously ranked, other than, you know, I think tier lists typically can be whatever you want. So some of them have categories of, oh, this is S tier, and then, you know, you can rank multiple things, multiple items in the same category. That's not going to be the fashion we're going for today. For the purposes of drama and to make it challenging for ourselves, we're choosing first place, second place, third place, fourth place, fifth place, sixth place, seventh place, which it was actually low-key a shock to my system to go through all these and realize, like, holy smokes, look at all the live-action shows we've gotten. All these productions. I had to make sure that I wasn't missing anything. So, for the purposes of drama, it might look like a very stark, like, oh my god, you put XYZ all the way down at the bottom. That's not, for me personally, all these shows fall within decimal places of comparison, you know, in my brain. If we were to do this on a scale of 1 out of 10, all of these would be up above, you know, the 6 out of 10s for me. You guys know. So, for the purpose of creating some drama, creating some, really having to rank it, challenging yourself with this first 7th place, but just because something is in 7th place, I would like to disclaim that does not mean that I think it's garbage. It's just for the purpose of the challenge of forcing ourselves to choose. So, since Tom came ready for debate this evening, I'm gonna go first and then let him roast my my list, because I think I have some surprises, and I think we have some disagreements in the upper half. Latter half of the list, I think, from middle ground on, I think we fall in line pretty similarly, but I think our first few, our first place picks, our top 3 are going to differ. So without further ado, I'm going to go in. In first place, and this is without question, this might actually be a few more decimal places above the rest, is going to be Andor.
You're starting from the top?
Yes.
Start from the bottom.
Start from the bottom.
Start from the bottom.
I organized it in my brain from the top.
Okay, all right. Well, you start from the top.
Yeah, I'll start from the top.
You start from the top.
That's how I organized it in my brain.
All right, you start from the top.
It's like trying to do the alphabet backwards.
You didn't even write this down?
No, because this is all variable. This changes every single freaking day for me. So this is just me on this given day in this moment in the year of our Lord, 2025. This is where it stands. This could change in a week from now.
Zero prep. Excuses.
I'm the one who prepped the stream. All right, first place, Andor. Before I was so rudely interrupted, Andor, without question, is first place for me. I just think in terms of the quality. I've said this before, I'll say it again. This of the live-action Disney Plus Star Wars shows, I think, and I don't mean this in a bad way necessarily, but I think it's the only one that you could relocate onto a different platform, say HBO Max or just Max now. Max, I don't really know what another competitive platform, but something equivalent to, like, they're pumping out Penguin, they're pumping out good stuff over there. I feel like Andor is in that same caliber. Out of all the Disney Plus shows, in my opinion, you could take this, put it on any other streaming platform, and it would still survive. Because it's just a quality show, not by virtue of, oh, it's Star Wars, because I know that it was very divisive in the sense that a lot of people didn't resonate with the Star Wars elements of it. But for me, Star Wars aside, this is... Could it also be recency bias? Sure, because we just rewatched it, but regardless, this show has always stuck out to me as, like, we are spoiled. This is something different. In second place, and this is where I'm going to be controversial, because this might be unpredictable. It's going to be Mandalorian. For me, Mando's up in second place. In terms of quality overall, which, listen, I'll be the first to admit that the Mandalorian quality varies from season to season. They all have their kind of own individual tone going for them, you know, from season 1 to season 3, there's quite the transformation. But in terms of quality, story, character development, overall, I don't know how to justify it other than I know that the big question is going to be how does that beat Kenobi for you, which is third for me, but there's things about the quality of Andor that it surpasses Kenobi for me, because so much of my enjoyment, I try to look at Kenobi without the rose-colored glasses. I try to not have the bias of it's the legacy characters, Obi-Wan and Anakin, doesn't get much better than that, Ewan and Hayden, like, all that aside, the hype of Kenobi is one thing, the show, the product is another, and not to say that they're not on the same caliber, but for me, if you strip away the legacy characters of Kenobi, my investment in it changes because of the quality, the shortness of the show. The budget, as has been proven, I think, is the smallest of the live action shows. And if you don't have Ewan and Hayden there, you know, what's it giving? And so I feel like a lot of the bulk of this show is all that legacy stuff. Versus Mandalorian came in, and perhaps I have nostalgia about it because it was the first one onto the scene, but it blew us all away, and it was something new, and it took new unknown characters that nobody knew anything about and has turned them into some of the most iconic ones. And that's on character development and just quality in general. So that's why it took second, which is shocking to me as well, y'all. Okay, fourth place. Don't hate me, y'all. This is where it starts to get, listen, just because things are in the middle ground, like, that does not mean that they're not still top tier in my mind. It's gonna go to Acolyte. What can I say? Well, there's a lot that you could actually say about Acolyte, but the division in the fandom aside, me personally, this delivered everything I've been looking for. Freaking getting away from the freaking Skywalker saga, y'all. That's the one thing I've been thirsting for, and this finally freaking delivered. We gotta look into uncharted territory unless you've read the High Republic and whatnot, which I still am on my journey of doing so. So for me, it was very much new, fresh. I loved the new state of characters. I thought this ensemble cast was phenomenal. Y'all know that my favorite Star Wars is when it's not just focused on one person. I love that there were so many players involved here, focusing on, the Sith. Do I wish it had more? For sure, but choreography, story, shock value, just fresh, new, chef's kiss. Next, that's gonna leave Ahsoka, which it does feel a little bit sacrilege putting it this low on the list. But once again, I feel like this show is very reliant, similar to Kenobi, and it's not that it's a crutch necessarily to have legacy characters. But if I'm gonna be real with you all, when I look back on Ahsoka season 1, I don't really remember much other than those highlight stellar standout moments of, the cameos of World Between Worlds, Anakin and whatnot, healing my inner child that still had trauma from Revenge of the Sith. Like, that healed something in me that I thought was gonna just be irreparable damage for the rest of my life, thanks to George Lucas. But Dave Filoni said, no, we're gonna actually heal your inner child, and it did. But it's similar to Kenobi in that sense. If you were to strip away all of that, I still think this show, like Acolyte, has amazing choreography. The fights are epic. But there's also something about Ahsoka. It's like, I don't know. There were the visuals, some of the fighting, the choreography. It's like, that's a character that we know and love from the animation. Not that I don't think she deserved to be introduced in the live action realm. But I would still stand by, if they were to say right now, we're going to change this to animation for season 2, I'd be like, frick yeah, sign me the frick up. Because that's just where I know and love Ahsoka from. Not that that's maybe necessarily a fair reflection of the show itself, but I think there's things that you can deliver in animation, just example, that's maybe unfair, but the flashbacks of the Clone Wars, yes, were epic, were insane, but it was clearly shot in a sound studio that just had so much fake smoke pumped into it that you couldn't really even see anything, versus if that moment was animated, it would be entirely different. Those critiques are minimal. I'm just trying to explain why this doesn't fall in first place for me. What docks it down a few points. But again, that show for me is still like 8 out of 10. So don't let the placement on the list here deceive you. That's going to leave final 2 between Book of Boba Fett and Skeleton Crew coming in 7th, which this is a surprise to me. Because I think in terms of the quality, Skeleton Crew outmatches so many of these. The quality, the setting, it delivered the newness, the freshness, new characters, new faces, new planets, everything I always loved from Star Wars. But I think just my emotional attachment to the show, for those reasons, just wasn't there all the way. I still care about the characters. I was still interested in the story. I still think Jod is one of the best, most well-written and intriguing characters introduced in any of these freaking shows. If you want to talk about introducing a non-legacy character and giving some weight to them, like creating a really well-rounded, dynamic performance, like, give that to Jod all day, every day. But I think it's my emotional investment that's holding me back, and that's why this one, don't let the 7th place ranking fool you. That doesn't mean I think this show is the worst thing in the world. I still loved this show. You guys saw my reactions. It brought me so much joy. But I think that's what it was for me. It's a really joyful one to watch. But in terms of the rest of the weight on the canon, on my emotional investment, my, attachment to the characters, it doesn't compare to the rest of these. Book of Boba Fett, I wish I could rank this show higher because I am a Book of Boba Fett apologist. I think this show deserves more love and has been forgotten. I would freaking love a season 2 of this show. And I think it matches in terms of quality to Mandalorian. Literally has one of the best episodes ever in any of these shows. Mandalorian and Grogu and Luke training Grogu. So I feel like Book of Boba Fett gets lost in the mix, and it clearly still did, even in my own ranking, but I wish I could rank this higher if I could, because I actually really enjoyed this show, and I think it has some stellar, amazing, standout episodes, like when he's bonding and forming this familial relationship with the Tusken Raiders, like, showing you different sides of Star Wars that you haven't seen before. I think it didn't necessarily deliver so much on the underworld, the grit that a lot of us were looking for. And yes, was half of his episodes dedicated to Mandalorian, like, okay, time and place. I think it robbed his spotlight a little bit. It similarly suffers, I think, from it could have benefited from more episodes. If you're going to dedicate an entire one of them to Mando in a show about Boba Fett, give him at least 10 episodes. All of these shows, Andor's up in here because it's got 12 episodes. All of these should have freaking 12 plus episodes or more. That's my opinion. So that's my ranking. I'm a little scared because I haven't been looking at the chat, y'all. I've just been yapping. So let me go. I'm gonna do a quick, just check in. I can feel Tom over here. He's taking his notes. So, okay, now it's on, says Rafe. Yes. Yes, it's about to get heated, now that, I'm gonna do just a quick fire round of your guys' comments here. I love how Tom's writing stuff down. Mando second place is a good call. Okay, mirror domains. Okay, phew. I was getting nervous I was gonna get a little bit roasted for putting that above Kenobi, but I can't let the legacy bait guide me on all these. I was trying to look at them objectively. Bleeding Edge says Kenobi's just a 5 out of 10 for me. Kenobi is my second to last, says Sal. I strongly dislike that show. Only 2 episodes worked for me. Huge missed opportunity. I do agree with that. Unfortunately, listen, there are stellar standout canon shifting moments in Kenobi for me that I'll never forget. The confrontation between Anakin and Obi-Wan, seeing helmetless, broken helmet Vader, seeing Qui-Gon Jinn, but a show can't be carried by just these really heavy moments. That's why for me, when I look back on Ahsoka, I'm like, what even happened in the first season? Other than my brain just goes to World Between Worlds and Anakin. It's like, that's why I want more shows. Well, I guess I'm being freaking hypocritical, because here I am saying I want more shows that have new faces and new places, and I ranked Skeleton Crew in last place, but for me still, I want the show to have quality overall and not just be carried by the familiar faces in it. They made the Inquisitors act like Harry and Marv in Home Alone, and the Inquisitors should be scary. Is this in reference to Kenobi? I agree. The Inquisitors, if you watch Rebels, the Inquisitors are like a life or death. The animated Inquisitors, that's why for so many of these shows, maybe I have a mental blockage because we were introduced to these characters in animation, and for me, one of the only ones that does it successfully is Mando, introduction of Bo-Katan. I think Katie Sackhoff's incredible. I think Mando's one of the only ones of these shows that does a pretty good job of staying faithful and adapting the live action renditions of beloved animated characters. Skeleton Crew that low. I'm sorry, listen, that's why I disclaimed this up front, that just because it's in 7th place doesn't mean Skeleton Crew for me is still like 7.5 out of 10. It is still way above average in my brain, how I regard that show. I had so much fun watching it, but I can't deny my thoughts, unfortunately. You need a calculator and a flow chart to rank these shows these days, said Andrew. For real, I feel like I have to be out here defending my life. Bleeding Edge says in regards to the Acolyte, Chimera is the best part of that show, and he carried. That's fair. Speaking of similar caliber to Jod, introducing a phenomenal character that, in my opinion, deserves to be explored more. It is a shame. I think it's unforgivable that there's not going to be further exploration of his character in a season 2. Ahsoka's my third favorite, says Sal. First 5 episodes they nailed. The last 2 fell apart for me. They kind of fumbled Thrawn. I hope he has a bigger impact in season 2 in the films, because he was wasted. I do agree with that. Again, animated Rebels Thrawn is a lot different than the iteration of him that we saw, but I think his time still has yet to come. He was trapped, now he's out, so we will see. I'm not the only person who likes Book of Boba Fett more than most, says Sal. No, thank God. I really wish I could rank that one higher. I wish. Kenobi should have been a movie. Agreed, Sean. Agreed. I can't deny that I loved Kenobi and what it gave us, but I wish it was on the big screen, you know? Retro says, hey folks, I think Andor's overrated personally. The writing felt disjointed halfway through. Cassian Mander. Mando is better, I think. That is fair. That's very fair. Um, Pedro says you look so pretty. Thank you, thank you. I got dolled up for the stream today. Um, so yes, okay, quick. That was my quick run through. Wanted to check in, see what y'all were thinking, but I'm glad I didn't get too roasted. I got nervous that I was gonna get some flack for putting Kenobi in.
Just leave it there.
Oh, you want to just move them around?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, just leave it there.
All right. Tom's been silent here. It's my turn to shut up and listen. And I will not contend with anything you say because I know we're going to have some disagreements here, but that's where we're going to open up conversation. So, here you go.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, hope everyone's having a lovely day. We're here. She says we're not here to debate and we're here to just chat. But let me tell you, especially now that I've seen what you've put on the board here, we are here to debate. For sure. But not with the 7th spot because Skeleton Crew is my 7th.
Oh, okay. I knew the latter half was going to be commonality.
Not for number 7 because Skeleton Crew is the same spot for me. And I think for the same reasons. You're saying you enjoyed it. It was fun. It was new characters and new worlds, and visually it looked great. But overall, the emotional weight to the characters was not as strong as all the other shows on here. And it didn't touch to the greater lore in the same way that all the other shows on here do. So for pretty much the same reasons, Skeleton Crew is at the bottom of my list as well. But again, doesn't mean we didn't enjoy it. Enjoyed watching it. For sure. It was fun. It was new. But it is in the 7th place spot because all these films or all these TV shows have to find a spot. So, with Skeleton Crew at 7, we move up to 6. And I had Book of Boba Fett in 6th.
Okay.
As well. And I think my reasoning is this one was tough. And my next one was tough. Because like you said, Mando season 2.5 that takes place in Boba Fett, that episode with Luke and Grogu and Ahsoka is like potentially the best episode in any of these shows combined. It's that good. And even the Mandalorian episode before that is so good. But the Boba Fett parts of this show don't hold up to those 2 episodes in any way. They're not even close. And in particular, the finale, like leading off of episode 6, which is maybe the greatest episode of live action Star Wars television history, going to the finale, which was maybe the longest episode of anything in any of these shows. But the Boba Fett finale, like, you're never going to be able to compete with episode 6 in the Boba Fett finale, and it did not. So I think the finale of Boba Fett left a very bitter taste in my mouth. But like you were saying, all the stuff with Tusken Raiders and the beginning stuff is like super interesting and new, and seeing all of that and Chrysanthemum,
Oh my god, Chrysanthemum
is like all really intriguing. But then it goes to Mando and you're like, oh my god, this stuff is incredible. And it comes back to Boba and it's like a straight cliff dive because episode 6 is so incredible. So overall, Boba Fett was enjoyable, but I think Boba Fett and Skeleton are the 2 on this list where the rewatchability, except for Mando season 2.5 and Boba Fett, is not as high as the rest of the shows, which is why those 2 are at the bottom of my list. So, with 7 and 6 out of the way, piping hot take number 1, Mandalorian is 5 in my list. I have The Mandalorian in 5th place here. And it's a similar reason to, well, one similarity between Mando and Book of Boba Fett is that the only other contender for potentially the greatest episode in all of these shows is the Mandalorian season 2 finale. that episode will stand the test of time until eternity ends as one of the greatest television episodes in human history. The Mandalorian Season 2 finale. But Season 1, Season 3, Season 2.5 and Book of Boba Fett was the other best Mando episodes. And Mando Season 1 and 3 I enjoyed them. They've got great aspects to them. But I think overall, the 3 seasons of the show, if you take those stellar episodes out, it's a lot of rinse and repeat type of storylines. And we're not expanding too much in the greater lore. Relative to some of the shows that I have higher on my list here. So this was very tough, because Mandalorian Season 2 finale on its own could be top of this list, hands down. And just like Mandalorian Season 2.5 and Book of Boba Fett, those episodes are so incredible that it is very, very difficult to sit here and be comfortable with Mandalorian and Boba Fett being 5th and 6th, given that those episodes are in the lineup of those TV shows. But that being said, Mandalorian 5, Boba Fett 6, Skeleton Crew 7. So now, on to number 4. In the middle of the pack, I have Cassian Andor in the 4 spot. Now this is a very interesting one, and after rewatching it, I still go back and forth on where this show stands. But right now, it's in the 4th spot. And like you said, you focused on the quality of the show and the unique storytelling and the way this is told. It's certainly, I think, on its own relative to the rest of the shows in the slate. And all that is great. But it goes back to, relative to the 3 remaining shows, it does touch the greater lore. Obviously, we're directly involved with the Empire and the ISB and what's going on there, and Mon Mothma and the Senate and the politics of it, which is all fantastic. I love all that. But some of these other shows have that, along with the, in my opinion, the meat and potatoes of Star Wars, which is Jedi, Sith, Force, lightsabers, the mystical aspect. So with Season 2, there have certainly been teases, I mean, literal name drops in Andor Season 1 of Palpatine, aka the Emperor, aka the leader of the Senate, aka the one that's been name dropped by multiple people in Andor Season 1. So, and it's on a crescendo of escalation of the Empire's going to get more involved. It's going to lead into Rogue One. So, like, the build-up and the pace of this show is incredible. The world building is incredible. The character development is incredible. Visually, it's maybe the best one. And you can tell that Lucasfilm put everything they had into this show. I think
confirmed highest budget. I think
that's near, maybe near undisputable. So I think overall it's great. I think, especially after rewatching it, like that was the first time that I think either of us have rewatched the whole show through. It was great. I think Mando and Andor swapping 4th and 5th spots. This is the one that took me probably the longest to figure out which one would go where. But I do give Andor the nod over Mando because, like I was saying with Mando, there's a lot of kind of rinse and repeat episode themes, like, oh, what planet are they going to next, that type of thing. Andor doesn't have that. Andor is a beginning, middle, end story all the way through Season 1, and it just builds on top of itself, and every episode is really something new and building on what came before it. Versus Mando is kind of more circular in the middle of the seasons, but then obviously the beginning and the end of the seasons, they kind of push us to the next thing. So I think from a storytelling perspective, visual perspective, Andor gets the nod over Mando in the fourth spot. I will say you have Andor at 1, and your opening reason was because it could be on HBO Max. So the fact that you're ranking Star Wars shows based on how they would fit in with HBO Max is very interesting. That was a surprise to hear you say. You got into all the other stuff we just talked about, but you open with like, this show could be on HBO Max. Like, HBO Max is the god tier of serialized television.
I can elaborate on that when you're
which
done.
I think, sorry to get into the debate premature here, but I don't think you're wrong.
Well, don't get into it now until I can answer. Open it up for debate after you're done. Then I'll elaborate.
All right. Okay. We shall revisit HBO Max. Okay. So that's the bottom 4 here. In third place, Miss Ahsoka Tano is in third place. Now, this is one where you were kind of focusing on the reliance on legacy characters and should be animation, and outside of Anakin and the World Between Worlds, what happens. I disagree a little bit there. And you'll see by the rest of my list that I probably have a favoritism towards legacy characters and touching with the known greater Star Wars lore.
Clearly.
With the remaining top 3 here. So I think the use of, obviously, the story central around Ahsoka is one of its strengths. Because it's not so much learning about this character we don't know about, but taking this character on a next level adventure, which ultimately what this show is from beginning to end. It's just like Andor, where it builds on the previous episode and it keeps building and building and building and building. And then it ends where they have made their way to this entire other galaxy where there's some tie to the World Between Worlds and the Mortis gods. And now Thrawn has come back to the main galaxy with Ezra, and we have no clue what level of Thrawn is going to be terrorizing the main galaxy. And then now we have Ahsoka, apprentice Sabine, which I think is that's story point wise. Sabine's story is the hardest pill to swallow in terms of story for me. But you have Ahsoka, Sabine, and guiding light Force Ghost Master Anakin on Peridia going after Baylan Skoll and Shin and the Mortis gods. So where Ahsoka goes from beginning to end and what it's setting up for the future, I think what it's setting up for the future is maybe the strongest out of any of these shows. Potentially. I think Andor does a great job, but we know where Andor ends up at Rogue One, so that's why it's a little different there. Acolyte, we'll get into, does something similar. We kind of know where it ends up in like 100 years in the future. But in terms of where season 1 leaves off is very, very strong as well. So Ahsoka for me, and then obviously the Anakin stuff was great. I agree. The flashback scenes, like visually, were a little. They didn't go like they were on Mandalore. They didn't go like the full 9 yards in bringing Mandalore to live action. So obviously there's some budgetary restrictions there, or timeline things. Okay, but the story overall is really, really strong in this one, in my opinion. And with the new characters we get, the new lore, the new world building, it does a lot of great things. And I'm very excited for season 2. Very excited for season 2. All right.
I just want to acknowledge, Sal, I'm going to save your super chat for my part of the argument so I can retaliate, because Tom's calling me out on HBO Max and my name drop of it, but your comment helps me out and is exactly where I want to go. So I will get to that, I promise, after Tom finishes his ranking.
Interesting comment, Sal. Interesting.
I'm gonna unpack it, but I'm gonna let Tom finish his ranks.
All right. We've got 2 spots left. My second spot is Kenobi.
I had a feeling this would be your final decision.
An Acolyte takes the trophy. Now, the top 3 here are all common in the sense that they're focused around Force wielders, and a lot of legacy characters end up showing in Acolyte at the very end. They surround the mystical aspect of Star Wars with the Force and the Jedi and the Sith. When I think about Star Wars, that's where I immediately go to first. So that's a big reason why those 3 are at the top of my list here. Like I've been saying, I feel like the strongest episodes in Mando and Boba are the ones revolving around the same themes, with Luke showing up and the mystical aspects and the Jedi and the fight for the greater good in the galaxy, which ultimately comes back to the Jedi and the Force. So
sensing a theme here.
Now Andor doesn't have any of that yet and is right smack in the middle, just because the storytelling and the tone and the mature theme of it and the darkness of it is so strong and well put together that even though 3 of the greatest episodes of Star Wars television history are in the 5th and 6th spots here, and Andor is so well done that it brute forced itself into the 4th spot in my list. It shoved its way in there, and I couldn't think of any reason why to put it lower. But okay, so we got Kenobi at 2, Acolyte at 1. The reason, it's more of a reason that Kenobi is in 2nd versus Acolyte being in 1st.
Curious.
And the main reason is that if you look at this lineup of shows and you asked a person who's never seen any of them, what do you think the best show on this list is? I would be willing to bet a lot that it would pull near 100% of people saying that, oh, that Kenobi show should be the best. Because it's literally Revenge of the Sith, the sequel to Revenge of the Sith. If you say, oh, this show's about Obi-Wan and Darth Vader fighting again, and you just poll a general audience of people familiar with Star Wars that have never seen any of these shows, I guarantee that almost 100% of them would say, oh, that Kenobi show's got to be the best.
I mean, look at the most watched. If you were to look at the trailers for every single one of these shows, the Kenobi, I think, completely outperforms.
Obliterates them.
Yeah.
Absolutely obliterates them. We were looking at that Dork Discourse a couple weeks ago. So, that being said, the reality is, of people who've watched all these shows, Kenobi is not anywhere close to a unanimous number 1. And I think the reasons being are this show visually doesn't hold up to a lot of these other shows. I think there are some questions about the plot. I don't have as much as that. But I think visually and cinematically and choreographically and directorially, particularly with the fighting, like this show does have the smallest budget of any of these, and it leaves so many people scratching their heads. Why, when you literally have 2 of the most iconic characters in your entire franchise starring this show, and you give it the least amount of resources and attention that it deserves? So I think that's a main reason why a lot of people have the show lower, because of all the behind the scenes production business aspect of this show and why that ultimately hinders it and makes the viewing experience less enjoyable.
Especially when you learn that it was meant to be a film.
Yes, and it's like, this should be, I'm totally on board with that this would have performed so much better, and this story warranted the full cinematic experience for sure. So, all that being said, and all of that stuff, and the all of that is really why this show is not number one. However, for me, story wise, this show does nail it. Like leading up to the show, we were like, okay, how on earth is it going to make logistical sense for Kenobi to leave Tatooine, even see Vader again, leave Luke there? Like all these lore timeline questions of how are they even going to make this work? And the only answer that we came up with was he needs to have a threat to the children of Anakin and Padme that is great enough to where he is forced and has no choice but to leave Tatooine and protect the other child, which is Leia. And that's exactly what happens. That is exactly what happens. He's hesitant to leave, he doesn't want to leave, but then your other child that Yoda gives up on and goes and hangs out on Dagobah and is eating swamp food, leaves Obi-Wan no choice but to leave and protect Leia, the other daughter of Anakin and Padme. And he's willing to sacrifice everything to save Leia. That's the central theme of the show. And going into it, we were like, that's the only way they can make this work. And I think they nailed that aspect of it. And the scenes with Obi-Wan and Leia are probably some of the strongest scenes in the whole show. And then obviously, I mean, the way that they handled Darth Vader in the show is so incredible that the fact that they handled him so well in the Vader scenes, I mean, he is horrifying in the show, which is incredible. That for me, aside from the visuals and the unfair budget treatment, all that stuff, this show has to be at least at number 2. Now, why isn't it 1, you say? Well, that's a great question, everybody watching. It is not at 1 for me because there still is a little taste of disappointment because it is not the clear number 1 unanimous favorite best show out of this list. Like this, when they released all the Disney Plus, the slate of Disney Plus shows, and it was, oh my God, Kenobi Vader show, the excitement for that show is unlike anything that has come out since The Last Jedi in terms of Star Wars and in terms of excitement. Like this project was everybody had it circled as we cannot wait for this project. And it comes out, the visuals are lower compared to everything we've seen, all the other things we've already been talking about, and it's like the fact that people don't unanimously love this, it hurts a little bit. But it's the reality we live in. Unfortunately. So when you compare it against The Acolyte, for me, yes, The Acolyte does not have any legacy characters, really, until the very end. However, I think Kenobi kind of peaks and then dips a little bit with episode 4, and then peaks in episode 5, and then the way episode 6 happens kind of dips a little bit down. I don't think the same thing happens with Acolyte. I think Acolyte is a steady crescendo, just like Andor, just like Ahsoka, building on the previous episodes before it, and it builds to the finale. And the finale of Acolyte, I think, is potentially the best finale, best final episode in any of these shows. The way that it wraps up all the loose ends from that season and then sets up the future, I think it absolutely nails that. And the tone of the show is arguably maybe the darkest. I mean, Kenobi's very dark, Andor's very dark. This one is also very dark, and the choreography and the mystery surrounding Chimera and how the Jedi are handling this, like the political gray area that this show has, is so new and different, and like you were saying, goes to uncharted territory in terms of the timeline from what we've seen in live action. Um, for me, this one has the most new stuff in it, and also the most tie-ins to the stuff that I personally love the most about Star Wars, which is the Jedi and the Sith and the politics and the governance of the galaxy, and what the inner workings of all that stuff is. So, I think overall the visuals, and the episode of Acolyte, and the choreography and the way it was shot, the way it was shot and the choreography is leaps and bounds above Kenobi, which breaks my heart to say, but that's the reality. Which it breaks my heart because I don't understand how that's the reality we are, but that's the way it is. And so for me, that's why Acolyte gets the one spot over Kenobi.
All right. Well, dissertation complete. Let's catch up on some of the super chats that we missed. Sal, thank you so much, my friend. Thanks for waiting for us to get around to this. I wanted Tom to have a fair chance to finish his arguments. Andor feels like a Chernobyl or a Penguin or a Breaking Bad in terms of tone and writing. No other Star Wars show fits that description, and that's what makes it so good. Even bottom tier characters are A+, and Sal, you nailed it. I don't even have to make my argument anymore because for some reason that was an absurd argument to make for Tom. That took you by surprise that I would suggest that Andor is the only show that could survive on a platform like Max, which Sal thankfully did the list for me. I compare it to HBO Max because they have been the standard for quality television. When you think of highest caliber TV, the shows and productions that rack in the Emmys, it is Chernobyl, Penguin, Last of Us, Sopranos, House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, regardless of how you feel about the Game of Thrones finale, White Lotus, the top quality best productions. It's high caliber TV that, in my opinion, as of now, it's not that I don't like Disney Plus shows, but they are their own tone, their own vibe, their own production quality that, in my opinion, just doesn't compare. You couldn't put it side by side with any of these. Like, yeah, if you ask me, I love Kenobi, but Kenobi versus House of the Dragon, they're completely just different arenas, if you ask me, and that comes down to, perhaps Kenobi's not fair because it was nerfed with the budget. So that's what I mean when I say, Andor for me is the top dog because it could survive. You could take the Andor out of Disney Plus. You could take the Disney Plus out of Andor, and it would perform, I think, just as well, operate perfectly fine on any of these other platforms, not reliant on the Star Wars. So that's where we disagree. That's what's interesting, because
that's why our lists are very different.
I like Andor because it's not reliant on the Star Wars elements, and it could survive on its own and hold a candle to all these other shows. Versus you lean into and prefer the mystical, the lore, the canon, what tethers you to Star Wars. Which is fair, because that was a big reason that Andor was divisive. It didn't have any of those familiar elements, and it does feel like you're just watching, these mundane, ordinary, normal people, none of which are necessarily outright heroes per se. What would my vested interest be in them? But that's why I love Andor, because it focuses on all of the heroes in every corner of the galaxy who are literally risking their lives, making the ultimate sacrifice to not go down in the canon, to go unnamed forever in the history of heroes in the Star Wars universe. They're doing it regardless of whether the history books will remember them. That's what I love about Andor. The message is you don't have to be a Jedi or a big named character. As Sal was saying, that show is equally similar to, what I love about Acolyte. It's a big ensemble show. Andor especially. Casting is amazing for both of those shows, I think, and, it just captures one of my favorite things about Star Wars, which is you can have heroes in unlikely places. So that's where we defer. That's interesting, and that obviously influenced our top half of our lists.
Yeah. I'm totally with you, Sal, and with you, dear. that the quality, the visuals, the character development, and the keeps that level the whole show. Definitely for character development, I think Andor is number one in that category. And yeah, you're right. Like if you have, I mean, you compare it to Penguin or Chernobyl or these other HBO Max shows, it does fit that level of deep character development and world building, and tone that those shows have, which is great. And that's why it was number 4 on my list, because the production quality and just, you can't deny that show how much quality exudes out of that show. You can't.
Can you elaborate more on Ahsoka in where did I have Ahsoka? I had it.
We had
in
Ahsoka at 5.
5th.
Yeah, so
That's a pretty
had
drastic.
we had the same 6 and 7. Your 3, 4, 5 were my 1, 2, 3. So your 1, 2 were my 4 and 5. So you have Mando Andor below the Star Wars, the Jedi Sith shows, and I have Andor Mando below the Star Wars Jedi Sith shows.
Mm-hmm.
You have Andor Mando above the Jedi Sith shows.
Alice,
you
hello.
You had Kenobi, Acolyte, Ahsoka. I had Acolyte, Kenobi, Ahsoka. So we totally jumbled those 3 around relative to each other. Oh, are you making a poll? Oh.
Yes, because our Queen Alice asked if she had missed the poll. You had not, and that just inspired me. So to not summarize our rankings, but if you've been here and you watched both of us go through, we did have some very differing. Yeah,
I can repeat them.
You don't have to. You just did.
No, I didn't repeat it. So
Okay.
Kat's list was Andor 1, Mando 2, Kenobi 3, Acolyte 4, Ahsoka 5, Boba Fett 6, Skeleton Crew 7. Mine was Acolyte 1, Kenobi 2, Ahsoka 3, Andor 4, Mandalorian 5, and then Boba Fett and Skeleton Crew 6 and 7. So our 6 and 7 are the same. Kat has Andor Mando at 1 and 2. I have Andor Mando 4, 5. I have Acolyte, Kenobi, Ahsoka 1, 2, 3. Kat has Kenobi, Acolyte, Ahsoka at 3, 4, 5. So we both had Ahsoka in the lowest of our Jedi Sith shows.
Yeah, there's a commonality
and then
there.
we just flip-flop Acolyte and Kenobi.
So there's the rundown, as Tom so graciously summarized our highlights, our shows ranked 1st through 7th of the live-action Disney Plus. So the poll for this evening, thank you, Alice, for the reminder and the inspiration. Who do you side with more, Kat or Tom? And neither of us will be offended by the outcome, so don't feel nervous if you were to all vote in favor of Tom. I'm not gonna hate y'all.
No, this is the purpose of a debate.
Yes.
We're curious. There was
Don't make me choose.
No hurt feelings.
Thank you, Sal, for sharing your list. Yes, I wanted to also hear from everybody else, everybody sounding off on their respective thoughts of these shows, because I knew if every single one of us were to make one of these lists,
you must choose.
They'd be different. Everyone would have, it's like snowflakes. No two would be alike, I don't think. So Sal so generously gave his ranking. Andor also in 1st place, Mando. Okay. We had the same top 2. 3rd place is Ahsoka. 4th is Boba Fett. Okay. High ranking Boba Fett. Skeleton Crew in 5th place. Kenobi in 6th place. Acolyte in 7th. Interesting. See, everyone's lists rank so differently. Retro says, I disagree with both of you. I've only watched 3 shows. My ordering is Mandalorian, Obi-Wan, and Andor, though they are all very good. Interesting. Yeah, I think something about Mando, it's commendable what it did to draw the attention of...
Yeah, it kicked
Andor's
the whole thing off.
Yeah, it kicked
the
the
whole thing
whole
off.
Disney Plus era off. And that's... just kudos to them for doing that with unheard of characters. There's something to be said about the cultural tectonic shift when that first trailer dropped and Howard Stern found my reaction. That was a time to be alive, because it rocked the world, because it drew in Retro saying they've only watched a few of the shows, Kenobi being one of them. I think that's the case for probably a lot of Star Wars fans. And I even shocked myself composing this list for the tier maker. Like, holy smokes, there's 7 live action Disney Plus shows. Like, you don't think about the quantity as we're going through, as the years start coming and they don't start coming, or whatever the Smash Mouth lyrics are from Shrek. But you don't think about it in hindsight. So for me, even, I was like, holy smokes, am I forgetting something? Like, there's so many of these shows. And I think we'd both admit, you say all the time, but we have dedicated sweaty Star Wars friends in our life, in our family, who haven't watched maybe even a single one of these shows. But Kenobi would be the one to attract people, as...
I know a lot of people who have watched Kenobi and nothing else.
Yeah. So...
Because the allure for Kenobi is on another level of than any of these shows. And that's why, for me, it's in the 2 spot, because how do you have a show of that premise and it is not the unanimous best product that you've created since you bought the Lucasfilm brand? That is a tough pill to swallow, and I think it's a reason why Kenobi is pretty low on a lot of your lists that you guys are putting in the chat.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of the Kenobi, the reality, Kenobi was a big process of, okay, once time had passed, it had been a hot minute, it was no longer fresh, hot off the press, recency bias, the rose-colored glasses came off. That was probably the harshest of probably the most significant transformation for me, of going from, like, the hype to the reality, of being able to take a step back and look at the show objectively, appreciate what we got, but still mourn what it should have been, which is I inherently got nerfed by being only a limited series. I think probably has the least amount of episodes of all these shows, because you noted Book of Boba Fett had 7 episodes, right? Skeleton Crew had 7 or 8. Y'all fact check me on that. Mandor, 3 seasons worth, obviously.
Mandor? You just said Ando and
Cassian Mandor. Ando. Cassian Mander. Obviously Andor 12. Mando has 3 seasons worth. Ahsoka, I think, had 8 episodes, 8 or 7 as well. So Kenobi being the smallest budget, the least amount of episodes, I can't deny that it shows, and the show, I think, ultimately suffered for it. Whereas I believe it was recently revealed that Andor does have the largest budget allocation.
It does also have the most episodes, 12 episode seasons, so.
And it shows. I can't deny that, because I'm not one to gravitate towards, oh my god, when the budgets get released for new movies or shows, and it's like, this is gonna be amazing. It's like, if there's one thing we've learned about Hollywood as of late, big budget does not equate to quality. You see so many of these films now that are tanking in the box office, and then their budget is revealed, and it's like, why the frick was this $350 million and it's not even clearing 20 million in theaters? What's going on? Like, there's so much, I think, poor budget allocation that's happening right now in Hollywood, and I think we're gonna see a big cultural shift. But so I'll be the first to say, budget does not equate to quality. Unfortunately, though, for some reason, for Star Wars, it does. And that's probably just by virtue of being sci-fi and what you can do, special effects, shooting on location. Unfortunately, Kenobi, you can tell it was shot in a lot somewhere, or in a sound studio.
Episode 1 is sand. Episode 3 is sand. Episode 5 and 6 are sand. 2, you go to Dayu, which is that city looking place.
Great. Dayu was one of the better sets of the show.
4, you go to Fortress Inquisitorius. That's that's not sand, but it's just black and
still looked better in Jedi Fallen Order,
and gray.
Yeah, no,
so you got light colored gray.
I sound like I'm trashing
or dark
Kenobi
colored
right now,
gray.
I swear.
But the vision, like the it's like the justification seems to be, we have this story where the 2 main characters are the most iconic characters, so we can get away with having the story be good around those characters, And that'll carry the show enough to where we can sacrifice a little bit in terms of the other things that make Star Wars great, which is epic worlds and epic scenery, epic creatures, epic moments. And we can dial it back a little bit on those areas for the benefit of other shows, monetarily speaking, financially speaking, because we have these two iconic characters, which the reality is that's the complete backwards way to think about it. Because the reality is, if you compare the last time we see those two characters together, aka on Mustafar, you have the most over the top, grandiose, ridiculous, epic scene in probably the history of Star Wars eternity, which is like a 20-minute fight on a volcanic planet with lava spewing everywhere, and they're literally surfing on lava, and it's the greatest choreography and shot and score in maybe the franchise history, to their final battle in the show, which is dark, gray. You can't see him fighting because the camera is so zoomed in on him. So you're like, you don't get the whole feeling. And it just feels so much more dialed back in terms of everything else surrounding the characters.
Which I try to reconcile with and look at the other side. What would, from a directing standpoint or a production standpoint, what's the artistic choice for that? I always try to reconcile with, or at least acknowledge, okay, why did they make that decision? And I can respect for Kenobi, yes, to shoot choreography so intimately in the unstable cam, it adds to the angst and the stress. It puts you in Kenobi's shoes, and he's been out of the game for a hot minute, and it's meant to be emotional and intimate, but yeah, in context of what we were expecting, especially because that style of, the videography, the filmography, the camera work, this is no flack at all to, the incredibly talented crew and direction of Deborah Chow and whatnot, who made that happen.
It was all done with intent.
Yes, it all definitely had a purpose, but it just, for us personally, didn't land.
Because you compare to the times that we've seen those two characters together before, and it is wide shot, take it all in. You've got two master swordsmen going at it, two incredibly powerful force users going at it. We're zooming out, and you're going to see all of it. And yeah, you get the moments where they cross sabers, and you get the intimate face cams to get their emotions, but not while they're actually moving.
Yeah.
Like all the movement is captured wide shot for the most part. But in the Kenobi show, it's very different. And it could be because, okay, well, you have old, rusty, old man Kenobi, and then asthmatic, limbless metal man Vader. Like, okay, are they obviously going to be as fit and acrobatic as they were in Revenge of the Sith? No, of course not. But are they still both insanely powerful with the Force? And Vader, and like, you can still wide out and see the differences in how they approach the fights now. And it's not like every single shot is super zoomed in and you can't see anything. Like, they're obviously wide shots, but the way that it was handled is just so different from the last time we saw them in Revenge of the Sith.
I'm cracking up at y'all refusing to vote up in here. Jason,
I know, we got 14 votes and 25 people watching.
Jason's been saying, I can't choose. We need a new
You
poll.
must choose.
Sean saying, I will not vote. I will not rank. I will not fall into the poison of comparison. Enjoy the shows as they are. I will. I am the one in the middle. I am the Pandu. Y'all, we will not be offended, but I'm winning. I mean, it's easy for me to say right now. I got almost 80%.
You are.
Y'all are on my side when it comes. You're not choosing us. It's not a personal vote. It's where do you stand in terms of your Star Wars rankings as allied with ours. I think for you, what's bringing you down is I think you are a rare acolyte as your number one. And you know what? That's why I was curious. I wanted to pitch this topic tonight because I know after Acolyte aired, that was like your fresh, like, this is my new top dog, my new fave. So I was curious if that still remained after, it's been a while.
Yeah, I mean, the feeling that I got watching that week to week Like, it's such a dark tone, and you have these Jedi Masters that are hiding something. Like, one of the biggest critiques of the Acolyte is, oh, the Jedi are evil now? Is that, like, Jedi are bad guys in this show? And it's like, that's one way to look at it. The other way is, oh, something terrible happened, and they couldn't muster up the strength to come clean with the truth, and they swept it under the rug, and then here we are 20 years later, and all of their guilt has driven them all mad, and they're now paying the price for their mistake and their decision that they made in the past. Now, most intriguing part, which what they set up is, okay, how is Vernestra going to handle this with Yoda? And how does that go over? Because they've tried to keep it in the low ground, which is, okay, how many other stories of this have happened, which ultimately leads to the hubris of the Jedi and why they can't set Palpatine literally take over the government. It's all building up to that, which ultimately leads to the downfall of the Jedi. So yeah, these Jedi in this show all have this baggage that we learn about, but like the mystery and what the baggage is, and then Chimera coming in and literally slaughtering, brutalizing all of them in the most brutal fight scene in Star Wars history. I'm saying that with a dead straight face.
No, I was gonna say
dead straight face that is the most brutal fight scene, and Anakin gets all his limbs chopped off and literally lights on fire. That is maybe the other number one. But Chimera shanking a young Jedi girl, shank style 3 times, and straight up snapping Yord Horde's neck. Like,
I want to acknowledge Emery's comment here, because yes, read Dark Disciple, people. If you have read Dark Disciple, the behavior of the Jedi and the light through which they are painted in Acolyte is not different, because Dark Disciple literally straight up is like, Jedi are straight up bad. They're straight up selfish, and they will throw aside their own. Quick, also shout out to Nerd Chronic. Thanks for being here.
What's up, nerd?
I voted for Cat overall, but I respect Tom's Acolyte #1 spot.
Respect back to you.
Shout out. Thank you for being here.
Shish kebab Jedi. That's right, Charlie. That's right.
Indeed. We are loyal to both of you. Star Wars, Dork Discourse, everything fandom worthy, no matter what side we are on. We are a united front. You know what? Heck yes, Jason Olsen. Agreed. And I'm glad that we can all gather here tonight and share our opinions. And I'm thankful that you guys were shouting out in the chat, sharing your thoughts as well, backing us up, or feeling willing to fully disagree with us. Like, I'm so happy. I was hoping that people would not be afraid to voice, because like I said, if we were to all go through and make our own tier list, I don't think a single person's here would be identical. Acolyte had some really cool fight scenes, says Alice. Yes, and I was gonna go as far as to say I agree with you that the Chimera decimation of everyone, ending of episode 4 into episode 5, the cliffhanger of Chimera versus the decimation afterwards is up there for me.
Everything about that moment, the music and the tone and the just pure fear that May feels, like that is a thing in that we don't have in any of these other shows. Is that fear. Like, even in Kenobi, like, we have the fear when Vader's rolling down the street in episode 3 and he's snapping necks and dragging people.
But that's nothing new. We know he's capable of that.
Like, the fear of Vader was taken to a new level.
This was heightened because it was a mystery.
It was a mystery, and May is force sensitive. It's not some peasant on the street just who happens to be wrong place, wrong time, getting their neck snapped by the most powerful force user in the galaxy, maybe next to Palpatine and Yoda, but at the time, limbless man. But like an Acolyte, it's May fears her own master to that level, and you sense that through the screen. And then we see her master show why she fears her master so much in the very next episode. So like that whole 4 or 5 transition, was so insane. So insane.
Makes a really good point. Acolyte gave us the headbutting a lightsaber technique, one of the coolest ideas in Star Wars.
That too.
Yes. Whereas Kenobi gave us the baseball bat with a lightsaber.
Yes, and that's another thing. Episode 4. I think episode 4 of Kenobi is the unanimous weakest link of the show, I think.
Which we were talking about, which is a shame because it's in Fortress Inquisitorius, one of the coolest locations in all of Star Wars.
Yeah. and the baseball bat, like, in my head, the way I rationalize it is, oh, he didn't want to mutilate the stormtroopers in front of
Leia.
little Leia.
Okay,
So
that's fair. That's fair.
he was just wounding them by just tapping them with the
disarming
saber.
them.
So like, okay, that's a if it was the other way around and he literally cut all their limbs off and like was playing force basketball with their decapitated heads in front of Leia, okay, yeah, that would be a little strange, and it'd be like, Kenobi, you're really gonna do that in front of this 8-year-old, 10-year-old girl or whatever? So like, okay,
Charlie's
the baseball bat was like a little conservative in the opposite direction of that.
Charlie wants to disprove the baseball bat saber. I'm just joking, Charlie. I'm just joking, but it was stuff like that. I think the choreography, to bring it back to the positive in Acolyte, is unmatched. Just chef's kiss. Incredible. And that was one thing, you know, not to get into the divisiveness of that show, but that episode was a bit unifying across the board, that even the haters were like, that was kind of cool. You know, it was undeniably sick.
Yeah, there was not one negative comment about episode 5 that I have seen to this day.
I mean, I've still seen them, but I feel like it came with an air of, that was still pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yes, well, unfortunately, most people, unfortunately for you, people are more in agreement with me, but I was curious because
there's 9 people who haven't voted, so those 9 are on my side.
Now's your chance,
to hurt your feelings.
Last chance. Don't be afraid to hurt my feelings.
They're afraid to hurt
Don't
your
be
dear
afraid.
feelings.
Speak your truth. Yeah, speak your truth. And if I know many of you are also just, you like to lurk in the shadows and whatnot, so we respect
totally
if
fine.
you are non-interactive. No pressure as always.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that the voting is in this way, because
well, I was curious.
I think Andor and Mandalorian are 2 of the most popular shows, and they're not in my top 3.
You know what? Fair, true.
So I think that's a big reason why.
So you're saying I played it safe?
Acolyte,
You're saying I'm mainstream?
No, I'm saying your list is pretty in line with what I would assume.
General.
Yes, it is mainstream. So the
okay, hipster. Okay, indie.
No, and I think that it's not mainstream. I think that is just the reality of. I think your list is more in tune with what people would say.
Nerd Chronic, good question, and I should have disclaimed this. Thank you for reminding me. It was not answered, and I feel stupid now that I didn't mention it. Thank you for pointing it out. How come there's no Bad Batch on this list? It was just, we were just focusing on the live action Disney Plus shows. I considered last minute putting animation in there. But I wanted to compare them. I think, for me, I felt like it would be personally easier to rank them, because the live action, you could compare the quality overall across the board versus throwing animation into the mix. It's harder for me to gauge, like, animated shows. But for me personally, like, some of these animated shows beat out so many of these live action shows because of, there's so much more you can do in animation with Star Wars. That's my opinion.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's just my opinion.
Yep.
That's the extent of it. Like, I just think visually, there's some things that can't be translated to live action.
I think for me, to similar reasons why Mando and Boba Fett are, Mando and Boba Fett are lower on my list, is because they are shows of extremes. You have a select few of the episodes in those shows that are like the greatest Star Wars things we might have ever gotten ever. And then some of the episodes where it's like, what is going on here? And it's just huge spikes and dips in terms of, you could get the greatest episode of all time, or you could get your maybe least favorite Star Wars episode of all time from week to week in those 2 shows.
There was a lot of disparity sometimes between...
Yes. And I think the same thing holds true with the animation shows, at least the full-size animation shows, which would be Bad Batch, Clone Wars, Rebels. Tales of the Jedi is a little bit of its own category. Visions is its completely own category. But the big 3, Bad Batch, Rebels, Clone Wars, it's the same feeling for me, where there's a lot of episodes in the show where it's like, oh yeah, it was fun, kind of like Skeleton Crew, fun, but I'm probably never gonna watch that again for the rest of my life.
Maybe not for the rest of your life.
And probably
if there's a season 2, we'll rewatch.
But there's also episodes in animation, the peak being Clone Wars, the Clone Wars season 7 final 4 episodes. Those 4 episodes are way better than a lot of the content in these live action shows.
Yeah.
And those 4 episodes, those 4 on their own literally might be the very top of...
Oh yeah.
It probably is spot 0 in my list, Clone Wars season 7 finale.
Yeah.
Because of the way that it was done, the way that it's seamlessly wove into Revenge of the Sith, which is my personal favorite Star Wars piece.
The emotional damage
of Star Wars thing ever, Revenge of the Sith. And the way that they took the emotion of that to another level and applied it to characters in animation and wrapped it all up. I mean, it is, I've rewatched that a million times.
Right.
And the tragedy aspect, like tragedy, there's no tragedy in Skeleton Crew, Boba Fett. Not so much tragedy in
There's some tragedy in Boba Fett. The entire Tusken tribe gets slain.
Okay, that's not tragedy relative to Order 66.
Okay, emotion. Yeah, I'm not crying in fetal position over that, but
getting slaughtered. Like the tragedy aspect is huge.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and then like same with Twilight of the Apprentice and Rebels. That whole thing is
right
in a league of its own in terms of Star Wars television. And even the Rebels finale is really good, and Ezra's sacrifice and all that is
Jedi
really
Knight.
hold
yeah, and Rebels.
Wait, and yeah, Kanan's sacrifice. Like there are some insane moments. I think those 3 together, Bad Batch is easily, for me, the 3rd spot.
Yeah, and then I thought of like, okay,
Clone
Tales
Wars,
of the Jedi,
Rebels.
Tales of the Empire. That's why I didn't include, because you're right, everything we're talking about here, like some of these animation episodes transcend any of the shows we talked about today, in spite of their medium. And I will be the first to freaking say this, that Star Wars freaking thrives on animation. Like, please, as I was saying, like if they announced that Ahsoka season 2 is going to be fully animated, sign me the frick up. Like, make any of these shows animated, and I think they'd be bolstered by that because there's no limitations. So that's why I didn't want to include them in this list, because it's almost hard to compare. It's almost, there's no competition for some of them, because it is the live action being hindered by, okay, the limitations of real life and what you can do, especially with the budget allocations, like that some of these shows suffer from, versus if they were animated, like who knows how I'd feel about them. So that's why I didn't want to. I would like to maybe we'll do an animated tier list one of these weeks, folks, to discuss, or just even brainstorm. Like, I just want more freaking. There's no confirmation other than we have Visions. We have Vision season 3. Lycos is here. Let's get it. Let's get it. Yeah. I've seen you gaming out the wazoo, getting it. Actually good quality gaming. And then Jerry's here as well. Let's get it. Had a little bit of strength just to pop in to say, hey everybody, really sick today. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that, Jerry. I hope you're doing better. But thanks for tuning in for a little bit. But don't strain yourself by being here. But we're sending you good vibes.
Also, that yeah from Kyle is a yeah, you're crazy. I think he's with me, which is where
what?
For me, all of the animation is below all of the live action.
Oh, you think so?
Because for me, the medium difference, I would prefer live action every day of the week over animation, because you can get, I feel, more emotional weight with the actual live action medium than animation, except for like those few episodes, the last 4 of Clone Wars, Twilight of the Apprentice, Kanan's Sacrifice, the series finale of Rebels. Those 4 moments, and some other moments throughout the Clone Wars, there are certainly moments that are absolutely insane in terms of emotional weight and epicness. Um, but if you're talking about the entire show, I'm still putting it below all of them.
Entire show of what?
And all the if you're comparing the entirety of the animated shows, oh, and Resistance, and the entirety of the live action shows, I'm probably putting them all underneath.
Are you for real?
No, I would probably put Clone Wars, Rebels,
Don't
and Bad Batch
shade.
above Skeleton Crew.
Put some respect on their freaking names. Clone Wars
would-
and Rebels
I
for
would-
me would go above. Honestly, a lot of these shows. I don't.
The
I don't
shows
know.
as they're in their entirety. That's
Okay,
the piece.
Clone Wars, you gotta sift through 5 episodes in the desert with a bunch of droids to get to the good stuff.
Yep.
You gotta earn your way through Clone Wars. So yeah, if we're talking about the disparity between, but there's no quality disparity in those shows. You know, they're consecutive and whatnot. It's just story. So yeah, some episodes are maybe more childish or more, not as enjoyable as others. And then when it gets electric, it's insane. And it's like, how are we just in the episode on a little side mission with droids and now we're on Mortis? Like, what's going, like, so yes.
Yeah.
I'm an animated fan, so I can agree with you there, but all up.
Okay, so I
misinterpreted.
misinterpreted the yeah.
Yeah.
I misinterpreted
yeah.
It was like LFG.
I know where Kyle stands. I know
going.
where his allegiances lie.
So that is my bad on the misinterpretation. But yeah, I would probably put Skeleton Crew underneath Clone Wars, Rebels, and Bad Batch, and then Skeleton Crew.
Okay.
Because those specific episodes, are so incredible that I would certainly prefer to watch the entirety of those shows versus watching Skeleton Crew again. Maybe Boba Fett, but I'm putting episode 6 of Boba Fett above a lot of those stellar episodes in the animated shows. Probably not Clone Wars season 7 finale, just because of how masterful those 4 episodes are together. But I don't know, that's tough. So potentially those 3 animated shows, the blockbuster animated shows, go in between 6 and 7 on my live action list.
Yeah. Well,
but then what about the Clone Wars movie? And what about Resistance?
You gotta rewatch that if we're gonna be seeing a Road to the Hut in
you gotta watch
allegedly.
Resistance first.
I never did watch. Well, I guess we can't have a full list until we actually watch all of Resistance.
There's like a 3 bullet point summary I could give you to summarize the entire show.
I think you have.
So,
but we'll spare the chat. Don't spoil it for them. But this has inspired me. Perhaps we will do episodic rankings. We'll take some of the primary highlight episodic arcs of each of these shows, like Mortis or Twilight of the Apprentice finale, Victory and Death. Maybe we'll do a tier list ranking our best animated episodes. That could be fun to give the animation some love and to try to summon via the ether, via the Force. Please, we need to freaking manifest some confirmation of some other Star Wars animated series that isn't just Tales of, or obviously still hype for Visions, but we need another show. Give me freaking something. That cannot be the end with the Bad Batch. Not that it wouldn't be a good ending. It was a happy ending, but please, there's got to be more. I just need more, please.
We didn't see Sid's head on a spike, so it's
it wasn't entirely a happy ending.
It's not good enough.
That was the one thing. But this turned into quite the debate tonight. So this was hopefully an oldie but a goodie for those of y'all who've been around since the dog days of our origins with Dork Discourse, getting heated, getting Tom whipping out the notepad. That's when when he whips out the suit, the glasses, the pen and paper. That's when we're in for a ride. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. Thank you for those of you who shared your respective rankings and chimed in and whatnot. And as always, if you've just been hanging out, lurking in the wings, lurking in the shadows, I say lurking like it's a bad thing, but that's what I do all the time on other people's channels that I love. I just watch from afar. So, but if that's the case for you, we still love you too and appreciate your presence here. We still feel it. But thank you guys for joining us for this exciting episode. If you would like to see some more tier lists, Star Wars or not Star Wars related, maybe we'll just do some of our favorite shows, because we spent a lot of the latter episodes of 2024 talking about our highlight TV shows and whatnot. Maybe we'll just do a TV show tier list in general of shows that we've both watched that we would rank and whatnot. Who knows? Because we're in a little mini Star Wars drought until we get some Andor morsels. So everybody manifest that. Speaking of praying through the ether, let's manifest.
Trailer would be nice.
An Andor trailer in the pipeline.
Would be nice.
But until then, hopefully that will be happening soon. But regardless, hope you guys are doing so well as always. Thanks for joining us for another episode this week. We hope you guys have a great rest of your week in store. Do something fun. Do something that brings you joy. And we hope you have a great rest of your day, night, morning, 3 a.m. Day, night, morning, evening, 3 a.m. wherever you may be. And we will see you guys again very, very soon.
We didn't even touch on the films. We talked about
that's a whole
live
other
action
can of
shows,
worms.
animated shows. Zilch on the films.
Well, I made a ranking forever ago for the films, and I don't think they know your ranking though. So stay tuned, folks. Let us know if that's something you'd want to see.
Maybe not.
Updated movie ranking for Star Wars. But until next week, we will catch you guys again very, very soon. Bye, friends.